Today is day 2 of dismantling the 1997 Porsche Boxster, the 986. Taking everything off the bottom in order to get at, guess what, the IMS bearing. So I thought today a good way to start would be to drain the oil, because I'm going to have to do that sooner rather than later, because you have to support the engine from underneath with the gearbox out. And one of the great things about the Porsche is that the engine drains directly down from the oil pan rather than from the side. So when the oil drains, it comes straight down and not all over everywhere. The bad thing is whoever changed the oil last really over tightened the bolt in the bottom of the pan, so I had to use my trusty breaker bar extension to loosen it off. It shouldn't be that tight. Anyway, let's drain the oil. So there you go, that was straightforward and no mess because it's draining straight down. There's the plug. As soon as it's drained, I'll put it straight back in. That was a T8 socket, and I will pull off the oil filter and have a poke around in that and make sure that there are no metal particles. Sorry for the noise in the background today. They're redoing the road outside my house. I live on a cul-de-sac, and we had a really nice little roundabout with a nice mesquite tree in the middle of it, and they've decided to rip that out and flatten it off. Progress. While I'm waiting for the oil to drain, I'm going to take out the bolts to remove the support bracket and heat shield on the back of the gearbox. Those are all M13. You need to take that bracket off to get clearance to pull the gearbox back when you take it out. While I was waiting for the oil to drain, I loosened off 3 bolts on each side on the drive shafts. So we can see that here I just loosen them, and because the way the drive shafts are, they point slightly to the front, so it's difficult to get at the ones here. So I've taken the car out of gear, taken the handbrake off, chopped the front wheels, and now I'll just rotate this wheel through 90 degrees, which is about there, and I'll be able to get at the 3 remaining bolts. And there you have it, tied up with a zip tie out of the way. I've left the bolts in for the moment, there's no harm in doing that. I'll know where they are. One thing that really helps to get these out is a long socket with a round end like that. Helps you get past the rubber gaiter. And this is the best investment ever. Way better than a ratchet. So now it's just lather, rinse, repeat on the other side. Do the same thing and we'll have both of those out. There we are, job done. Both the drive shafts are loose and out of the way. Now I just need to undo the gear linkages. So they do just pop off, so you can lever that one off there, lever this one off here, unclip, and then they come away from the gearbox. Easy as pie. Here we are with my trusty doodad. So if you put it behind the rubber and just pop that off, it just comes off that ball there. This one's a little more difficult, but I think with something on both sides, I've got this big screwdriver here. There you go, that just pops off. And there we have it. Those look pretty grimy. So now the idea is these clips you just squeeze together with a pair of pliers. Right, so if we squeeze together these 2 tabs here, there we go, So that's one. And the other one is the same process except higher. I'm on my tiptoes here. I could always lower the lift down, but why make things easy for myself? There we go. Job done. Magic. Okay, so we're pretty much there. I need to undo the reverse switch cable. I have to find that first. I think it's at that end on this engine, and undo the clutch slave cylinder. And we see there's that plug there. So I'm guessing that is the backup cable, but I think looks like there's something else up here. The clutch slave cylinder. Of course now, where is it? Oh, it's up there. So there's the clutch slave cylinder. So I think it's 1 or 2 bolts to remove that, so we can get that out as well. Well, the oil is still dripping out of the engine. So while that's happening, I'm just going to loosen these 2 nuts and bolts here. You don't touch this one. I'm just going to loosen these up a little bit, loosen the ones up on the gearbox. You take this out first, then this. But I want to wait until I can take all the engine bolts out. And I'm missing the triple square to take this one out. Quite why they have a different type of bolt, I don't know. I've ordered it, I should get it today. But I can loosen everything else up while I'm waiting. This is pretty much ready to come out, just a few bolts to undo. I have a feeling there's a bolt missing off the engine case. It looks like there should have been one here, but it's not there. We'll see. So this I am doing with a 13mm spanner or wrench, if you prefer, on top, and a 13mm socket on the bottom. So there's one here and then one at the back. And the one at the back is impossible to get to. There we go, and then same on the other side. And then finally 2 bolts on each side to loosen up with a 15mm socket. You know, I'm doing pretty well. I've only banged my head once on the lift today. I just did it. God, that hurts. I have put myself in the ER banging my head on this lift. So the fact that I'm still here is pretty good. So that's all those bolts loosened, so I know those will come off easily. And I just banged my head again on exactly the same spot, right on the edge. Right on this edge. Yeah. Oil is still dripping slowly, so I'm in no rush, so I'll give it all the time that it wants. Time for a cup of tea, and then I'll come back, take out the clutch cylinder, and start loosening the engine bolts, and hopefully by then Mr. Amazon will have come with my triple square socket. But I don't think it's going to fit in there. I think I may have to find something else. I guess I judged that just about right. I pulled all the oil out and dropped the filter, and it doesn't look too bad. I don't think there's any major problems. I know this engine does smoke a little bit. There's the tiniest amount of glitter in the oil filter housing, but nothing major that would indicate that we've got a bearing problem. And I've taken a look at the oil filter, that looks fine, there's nothing on that. So I think everything looks good. And there we have the clutch slave removed, it was just one 13mm bolt through there, and then you have to kind of wiggle it a bit and it comes out with a little bit of protesting. Well, that's everything disconnected at this point. So all I have to do now is undo the bolts on the connecting the gearbox and the engine and take out the gearbox mounts, and it's ready to come out. So I did get this this socket to fit here, and it works. I've already loosened that bolt. That was great. Not a lot of room here, but I was able to get my the breaker bar in there. So with that, I'll be able to get that one undone. And I did a little bit of research. Even though it looks like there should be a bolt here, I see a lot of other people don't have it, and consensus is that early Boxsters omitted this bolt here. So there's 7 bolts to take out, and I have a cunning plan. I printed out this from, it was on Pelican Parts, because all these bolts are different sizes, and so what I'm going to do is not only label the bolts with a Sharpie, so A, B, C, D, etc. I'm going to stick them through this piece of cardboard. I've seen this done before, and I think that's a good idea. That way I'll know exactly where everything goes. This is the bolt that is non-existent. This one is a little bit difficult to get to, but you can get up to it. You can get up to it from this side over the top without having to undo the back of the convertible top and get at it from the top. So I think that is doable, but it just depends how tightly that thing is done up. Interestingly, the transmission fluid, which I haven't taken out, I'm not going to at this point, the transmission fluid for the bolt, it requires one of these tri-square sockets to take it out, and I saw on Pelican Parts they're selling that for $80 for this part here. I bought a whole set on Amazon for $14, and it fits. So good old Amazon. Now there's not a lot of room to get this one out. I mean, you can get the socket on it, but then you can't get anything on the socket very much. But with one of those jiggly adapters that goes through angles, whatever they're called, you are able to loosen it enough that you can then undo it by hand, I hope. Well, that's most of the bolts out. You'll see there is an empty space for D, and I haven't yet done H, that's next. D is a little difficult to get to, and because of that piece of tubing that's there, you can't get a socket on it, but you can get a spanner or a wrench on it. So that's a 16mm, or if you don't have 16mm, that's 5/8. But of course you can't pull it out, but it's loose, so I'm just going to leave it there for the moment, and that will actually remind me to put it back in the hole before I put the gearbox back in. All the bolts connecting the engine and the gearbox are out, and you can see it's already coming apart, which is a good sign. I've got my transmission jack underneath the gearbox, and it's secured not only with the chain at one end, but with a trusty strap at the other end, and the engine is supported with a jack and a block of wood underneath it. So in theory, all I've got to do now is take off these bolts I loosened earlier, and the whole thing will drop out. Hopefully it doesn't actually drop out. The only thing that concerns me doing this by myself is this. This is in the way, and I'm not sure how much room I've got. I guess we're going to find out. And there we have it. Gearbox mounts removed. As far as I can see, everything is detached. The slave, which is loose. In the distance you can see that bolt which wouldn't come out. So let's have a look at this end. Yep, you can see it's separated, so I guess all we have to do now is pull this baby out. So what you can see, or maybe you can't see, there's a piece of tubing there. Which the top of the gearbox is catching on. So maybe with my trusty piece of pipe I can push that out away enough to get it in. Well, it needs to come down just a smidge, but it's resting on the cross member. So I don't know how we're going to do this. I do believe I've done it. How we're going to get that back in, I don't know. And there we have it. One gearbox out of the car. That wasn't easy, and it's not going to be easy going back in. Actually, it's not that bigger transmission. So now I've got to find somebody who can help me figure out what's wrong with first gear on this thing. So let's put the car back up, because I had dropped it down. I would think the first job for this is a good clean. One thing I will say is this bell housing looks disgusting, so that could do with a good clean. This throwout bearing seems pretty good, but I mean it's cheap, so I will replace it anyway. Nice. Nice. That is filthy. I've removed the 6 hex bolts from the clutch. I left the bottom one loosely in, so just in case it fell on my noggin. If you have an impact wrench, you don't need to lock the flywheel. Fortunately I do, and so I didn't. I have a feeling this needs a new flywheel. It's a dual mass flywheel and there's a tremendous amount of movement in it. So the Boxster has a dual mass flywheel, which means that there's a little bit of play in the two plates, but there shouldn't be that much. So that's a lot of slop in the drivetrain. So I'm going to have to replace the flywheel, which I had not planned for. I mean, that is a crazy amount of movement. Bugger it. Oh well, let's get this last bolt out. Try not to drop this whole thing on my head. It's a H6 hex socket to get this out, and now we just got to pry the clutch off. New clutch time. New pressure plate, you can see burning there. I mean, there's no scoring on it, but the pressure plate isn't that expensive. What is expensive is this thing. God, look how much movement there is in that. Damn it. Definitely not supposed to move that much. Let's get that flywheel off and see what's what. Well, at this point I have ground to a halt. Those are T55 Torx bits. Guess what? I have a T50 and I have a T60. I don't have a T55, so I'm going to have to order another tool. Not the end of the world. It's getting close to the end of the day, and this was the last thing I wanted to do today. I'm off to Summit Point for a race for a few days, and that will give me time to order not only that tool, but to order all the parts from LN Engineering and elsewhere that I need. And I am convinced I need a new flywheel, so I'll probably just get a kit that includes all the clutch parts and the flywheel. Oh well, not the end of the world.